A day of endings and beginnings. Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, where we sift through the calendar like it's Tinder for history. Swiping left on the boring stuff, swiping right on the weird, tragic, or just plain awkward. And today's date, September 8th, is packed. It's the historical equivalent of your group chat. A little bit of politics, a dash of natural disaster, a cultural icon sliding into the chat with a meme, and at least one guy who should have just stayed home. So buckle up, because September 8th is less a date and more a historical buffet. Some moments you'll love, some you'll regret, and some that will leave you asking, wait, who let Gerald Ford near the pardons aisle? Segment 1, the Treaty of San Francisco. Japan, we cool now? So let's rewind to 1951. The Treaty of San Francisco is signed, officially ending World War II in the Pacific. Japan basically says, okay, my bad. While the U.S. says, don't worry, buddy, here's some sovereignty and maybe a few military bases just for fun. This was less about punishing Japan and more about saying, hey, want to be on our Cold War dodgeball team? Because communism just picked up China and the Soviet Union, and we really need you in left field. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. The Soviet Union showed up, read the vibe, and said, this is just America renting Japan like an Airbnb for aircraft carriers. And Korea, they weren't even invited, which is like throwing a divorce party but not inviting the spouse. To this day, disputes over islands like the Kurils and Dokdo trace back to this treaty. It's the peace treaty equivalent of leaving your roommates to figure out who gets the Netflix password. Spoiler, they're still fighting about it. Segment 2, Gerald Ford pardons Nixon. From long national nightmare to long national side-eye. September 8th, 1974. Gerald Ford wakes up and decides, you know what this country needs? A little less justice. He goes on TV and announces he's pardoning Richard Nixon for, well, basically everything. Nixon's crimes, his cover-ups, his very suspicious love of tape recorders, poof, all gone. The only thing Ford didn't pardon was Nixon's fashion sense. Ford thought this would heal the country. Instead, it tanked his approval ratings faster than you can say Saturday Night Massacre. His press secretary literally quit in protest. Americans were furious because it felt like Ford was telling the nation, look, we can't stay mad at him. He's just a tricky little guy. It haunted Ford all the way to the 1976 election, where Jimmy Carter came in like the human cardigan America needed. But decades later, historians started giving Ford some credit, saying maybe he sacrificed his presidency to save the country from 2 more years of Nixon courtroom drama. Still, imagine explaining to voters, I lost because I forgave the crook. That's like saying, yeah, I dropped the ball because I wanted the other team to feel better about themselves. Segment 3, the Galveston hurricane, when the ocean sent a Yelp review. September 8th, 1900, the Great Galveston Hurricane. Imagine the worst storm you've ever seen. Now, multiply it by, oh God, we're doomed. Winds over 120 miles per hour, a storm surge taller than your house, and a death toll of at least 6,000. It was the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history, and it hit Galveston when it was basically Silicon Valley of the South. After the storm, Galveston built a massive seawall and literally raised the city, like with jack screws and sand. They turned the entire island into a do-it-yourself home improvement project. It worked. The next big hurricane killed way fewer people. But Galveston's economic glory, gone. Investors said, yeah, we're going to move up the road to Houston. Thanks, though. And that's how a hurricane helped Houston become Houston. Honestly, the storm was like Yelp leaving Galveston 1 star. Nice beach, terrible flood control, would not recommend. Segment 4, Star Trek and Oprah, to boldly go and to boldly talk. 2 cultural revolutions both launched on September 8th. First, in 1966, Star Trek premiered. NBC execs thought it was just cowboys in space, but Gene Roddenberry smuggled in allegories about race, war, and even the first interracial kiss. You know it's working when Martin Luther King Jr. tells Nichelle Nichols, please don't quit the show. We need you. That's when you realize you're doing more than just fighting lizard people in rubber suits. Then in 1986, Oprah took the stage with The Oprah Winfrey Show. Within months, she dethroned Phil Donahue and built an empire out of empathy and giveaways. If Star Trek made us imagine a better future, Oprah made us cry about the present while buying whatever book she pointed at. Together, they shaped culture so much that if you mash them up, you get the ultimate show. Star Trek, the Oprah generation. Every episode ends with a warp drive giveaway. Segment 5, battles, surrenders, and a city called New York. September 8th also gave us some wild military moments. In 1664, the Dutch handed New Amsterdam over to the British without firing a shot. It was the least dramatic real estate deal ever. One minute, it's New Amsterdam. The next, it's New York. And all Peter Stuyvesant got was a spot on a Steely Dan lyric. In 1863, during the Civil War, 46 Irish Confederates at Sabine Pass fended off 5,000 Union troops and captured 2 gunboats. That's like your beer league softball team shutting out the Yankees. Meanwhile, in 1941, the siege of Leningrad began. Spoiler, it lasted 872 days, which is less a siege and more a historical version of a bad Airbnb stay, except instead of bad Wi-Fi, you get starvation and shelling. Segment 6, births, deaths, and the monarchy sandwich. September 8th is also a date of big entrances and exits. Born on this day, Richard the Lionheart in 1157, who basically spent 6 months in England and the rest crusading, rebelling against his dad, or getting captured. Also, Antonin Dvorak, who gave us New World Symphony, and Bernie Sanders, who gave us finger-wagging speeches about billionaires. And let's not forget Patsy Cline, whose voice still gives karaoke singers everywhere a false sense of confidence. But we also lost some giants on this date. In 1965, Dorothy Dandridge, the first black woman nominated for an Oscar, died far too young. In 1981, Roy Wilkins, the steady hand of the civil rights movement, passed away. And in 2022, Queen Elizabeth II left the stage after 70 years on the throne. Think about it. On the same date Richard the Lionheart was born, Elizabeth II died. That's 865 years of monarchy bookended on September 8th. Richard fought crusades, Elizabeth fought tabloids. Honestly, both equally terrifying. In conclusion, echoes of a date. So there you have it. September 8th, the Swiss Army knife of history. Treaties that ended wars but started feuds. Presidents who pardoned crooks. Hurricanes that built cities up and knocked them down. Cultural revolutions launched from TV screens, and monarchs who remind us that history loves a neat ending. If there's one lesson from today, it's this. Never underestimate what can happen on a random Tuesday in September, because history sure doesn't.